And we're live. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 32nd episode of the FilmBrony Podcast. And as you can tell from the Ghostbusters costume I'm wearing today, this is the third annual Halloween special of the FilmBrony Podcast. I am, of course, Nick Canino, the guy, the co-host, and the guy who took over the podcast since 2020, and here with me is a guest of mine who started the whole podcast, and it's joining me as well. So, would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, I have nothing much to say except Happy Halloween, the time where we gorge on candy, watch horror movies, and once again bash another crappy entry of a certain franchise of the 70s.
Oh yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit. But welcome aboard, everybody. As usual, we're going to start up with the first thing that we always do on the FilmBrony Podcast, and that is the Blu-ray pickup.
All right, Blu-ray Showcase.
I'm sorry.
American Werewolf in London.
That's a great film.
Captain Phillips in Zero Dark 30.
Nice.
Casablanca and the African Queen. Death Becomes Her. Elysium Looper and the Total Recall remake.
Nice.
The original Footloose.
The original is a very good film.
Ghostbusters Afterlife.
That's a very good film.
Gone Girl.
A classic.
Hard 8.
I love that film.
Junior, pretty underrated. Memento. What? My guilty pleasure of the year so far, The Munsters. Patterson.
That's a great film.
RoboCop, the original, and the remake, the only two worth owning, in my opinion. Stand By Me.
That's a classic.
They Shall Not Grow Old.
Nice.
And last but not least, Where the Wild Things Are and The Never-Ending Story.
Okay, now I have a couple of Blu-rays myself. Some of them I forgot to show on the last podcast, but the following 6 I forgot to show on the last podcast, and the other one I just got earlier this month. So, without further ado, here we go. One of my favorite films of 2013, The Wolf of Wall Street.
That's a classic.
It is a classic. Then, what would have been my favorite animated film of the last decade if it wasn't for Spider-Verse, the Lego Movie.
That's a fantastic film. Really snubbed on the Oscars. You okay there?
Yeah, fuck this film. Then what? Søren, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, good. Then one of my favorite films of 2014, The Grand Budapest Hotel.
Grand Budapest is a great one. I think you're a bit stuck again. Nick?
I'm here. Sorry about that, folks. I've been experiencing a lot of difficulties with the internet, so
yeah.
So sorry if I get caught off a few times.
Okay, you left off at Lego Movie in Budapest.
Grand Budapest Hotel, one of my favorite films of 2014.
One of Wes Anderson's best.
Personally, my favorite of his. Then we have one of my favorite movies of 2015, The Martian.
Great film.
And then the last 3 are A24 films.
Mm-hmm.
Ex Machina.
Great.
Lady Bird.
Great.
And Marcel the Shell with Shoes On.
I need to get that. All right,
And look at this. Look at this. Look at this display.
I need to get that sometime.
You should.
Yeah,
It's all available at the A24 shop. So
yeah. And that's it for all our Blu-rays. And now for some movie reviews. My first one is The Greatest Beer Run Ever, and this movie was just okay. It's well directed by Peter Farrelly. There are some effective scenes here and there, and it is competently acted, even from Zac Efron, of all people. But its anti-war message is something you've seen a million times before, and more effectively before. Plus, at over 2 hours, it's way too long. See it on the Apple TV if you want, but I'd recommend other Vietnam movies first, and I'll give this a seal of accuracy.
fair enough.
Next up
I
is
was
God's.
I was originally planning to see it, but then I decided, I have better things to watch.
You're probably not missing much. Anyways, God's Creatures. Honestly, this is the seasons after Yang. It is well acted, the cinematography is really good, and there are some effective scenes throughout, but this was such a slow drag to sit through, especially since these scenes just happen without any real flow between them. I'd say wait until stream for this one, and I'll give it the seal of mediocrity. Next up is Hocus Pocus 2, and this is a movie that's extremely trying to tap on the nostalgia of 90s kids everywhere. How do I know this? Because it's just the exact same movie again, with little to no differences. Oh, and there are some new additions to this one. This has even blander main characters than the last one, even fewer laughs than the last one, a Walgreens product placement that's almost as blatant as the Krispy Kreme subplot in the Power Rangers movie, and a last minute redemption for the Sanderson sisters that nobody asked for. Some fine acting, effects, and a fun musical number keep this one barely qualified to get the seal of mediocrity. Next up
Okay,
is
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Next up is David Russell's Amsterdam.
Oh my god.
You'd think that for his first film in 7 years, David Russell would make his grand comeback to Hollywood, but not since Don't Look Up has such a talented cast been wasted in one of the most muddled, overlong, boring, and downright humorous scripts in a long time. The film looks great with some decent cinematography and solid production values, and the actors mostly do their best with the little they're given. However, this movie thinks it's way funnier and more clever than it actually is, when in reality, the stories are a confusing mess, and the shenanigans they go through are about as funny as child abuse. It's baffling how this movie cost 80 million to make, and none of that money was shown on screen. In a year filmed to the brim with overhyped Oscar films, this has got to be one of the worst ones. Avoid this one at all costs as it gets a seal of disapproval.
All right, now for my take, folks. This just beat Don't Worry, Darling as the most disappointing film I have seen this entire year. How the fuck did a movie with such A-list talent like Christian Bale, Margot Robbie, John David Washington, Chris Rock, Anya Taylor-Joy, Zoe Saldana, Mike Myers, Michael Shannon, Timothy Oliphant, Andrea Rosenberg, Taylor Swift, Matthias Schoenaerts, Alessandro Nivola, Rami Malek, and fucking Robert De Niro. How is it possible that you have all these talented cast A-list talents wasted in a movie that tries way too hard to be quirky and has no idea what it's trying to go for? How is that even possible?
I don't even know.
Oh my god. This will cost 80 million to make. And yet this movie's making like 24 million so far as of the recording of this, and this is already one of the biggest bombs of this year. And boy, does it show with this one, because even despite good performances by Christian Bale, John David Washington, and Margot Robbie, as well as good chemistry by them, and the film having excellent cinematography and production values and costume design, this is nevertheless one of the most inconsistent, and downright convoluted movies I have seen this entire. Actually, I take that back. One of the most frustrating and inconsistent movies I have seen this entire year. When I say the movie tries way too hard to be quirky, I mean it. Like it's trying to go for what the Coen brothers were doing with their quirky humor. It's like here's the problem: David O. Russell's not Joel or Ethan Coen. He's trying way too hard to be like that. To be like those guys I meant. Also, there's this scene that really got under my skin, and because of how much it's set up as a comedic moment. Like what could have been a funny scene in the film, all of a sudden gets ruined by a bunch of shoehorned in mean-spirited humor. I'm gonna have to spoil this one, but guys, on spoiler warning. Here we go. So early on in the film, we see Taylor Swift's character with Christian Bale and John David Washington's characters in front of the theater. And although the camera doesn't show the person responsible for it until the end of the film, it shows its hand pushing Taylor Swift's character into the streets where she gets run over. And it would have been a funny scene if it wasn't for what happens next. Because of the incident, now everyone is accusing both of these characters for killing Swift's character, even though they didn't even they didn't even touch her, nor push or kill her in the first place. It was somebody else.
That doesn't make a lick of sense.
No, it does not whatsoever. And when it was revealed who was responsible for it towards the end of the film, I kind of knew it from the start. Spoiler alert: the person responsible for this is Timothy Oliphant's character. Are you even surprised? Oh my god! You know, I rarely talk about controversy over the film or over movies, surrounding movies, but because I think most cases are bullshit. But this is one of those times where I have to side with the controversy with the controversy over the film, because it doesn't help that even despite David O. Russell making a lot of great movies in the past, like Three Kings, The Fighter, Flirting with Disaster, Silver Linings Playbook, my favorite of his, and American Hustle, he's sadly shown to be a very difficult filmmaker to work with, according to a lot of people who worked with him, as he was shown to be very, very abusive to these actors and actresses. And there was even one time where he got into a fight with George Clooney. I shit you guys not. David O. Russell, I have seriously lost all respect for you after this and the movie you made. You had 7 years to redeem yourself after the flop that was Joy, and this is the best you could come up with? Are you kidding me?
Safe to say he's become quite a has-been.
Unfortunately, at this point, it's just and this is what we mean by this year's being Don't Look Up. You have A-list talented cast wasted in a movie that all of a sudden it thinks it's clever and being quirky and funny and just all looking cool and stuff. Well, no, it isn't clever. Guys, do not waste your time with this one. It's one of the worst films I've seen this year. It's one of the most frustrating and inconsistent movies I've seen this entire year. I didn't see Accidental Love, which was under a pseudonym name he directed. I heard awful things about that one. It's gonna have to do a lot to beat this as the worst film I've seen from David O. Russell. I hated this movie. This is a big disaster for everybody involved, and without a doubt, it's getting a 2 out of 10. 2 out of 10 or a D. One of the worst of the year. Do not watch this one. And speaking of 2 out of 10, and speaking of another disaster, we'll get to in a little bit, but right now, Søren, go ahead.
Hey, remember the movie First Majority? Well, what that same director remade that movie only with a cruise instead of a ski resort and turned it into a boring and a pretentious mess. You got Triangle Sadness. Look, it's finely acted, decently shot, and with an okay soundtrack. But the movie did not have to be 150 minutes long, as scenes go on, and you don't really get to know most of the characters. Plus, there are some scenes in the middle that are more repulsive than entertaining. After this and Titan, which I haven't seen, but I've heard mixed things about, it's safe to say that the Cannes voters have lost their minds as of late. Skip this one as this gets a seal of mediocrity.
This is one of our biggest disagreements because I loved Triangle of Sadness. Now, I do agree with you that the film was a bit too long. You could have. I think it would have been fine as only a 2 hour and 10 minute film. Okay, maybe like 125 minute film, like 2 hours and 5 minutes. That's good enough as it is. Despite that, though, and yes, I do agree it's a bit too long since it's filled with some scenes that do go on and on and on, and I did wish they could have trimmed it down a bit. But despite that, this is one of my favorite movies I've seen this year. The acting was terrific, especially from Harris Dickinson, who's fantastic in the film. Charles B. Dean, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that name, who plays Yaya, was absolutely fantastic. Unfortunately, though, what's unfortunate though is that this is her last movie. That Charles B. Dean. I'm sorry. I'm really bad with names, but this is her last movie that she's in. As she unfortunately passed away this year. Rest in peace, by the way. But for her last movie, she did a fantastic job playing Yaya. She was great. And Woody Harrelson's not in the film that much, but when he is, oh my goodness, he was fantastic. The soundtrack is fantastic too. The cinematography is beautiful. I was emotionally invested in the story throughout. The writing was clever. Since it's supposed to be a satirical takedown on like the rich and the wealthy and the rich and the famous people. And that's why the satire worked for me. Especially the I have to disagree with you on this, Søren. The chaos with the overflow of puke and the exploding toilet. Like that's one of the funniest scenes I've ever seen in a movie this entire year.
At least we can both agree it's way better than Don't Look Up.
Oh fuck yeah. Yeah, really. It's very well directed, very well edited. I really like the film's humor, the film's satirical humor, and I actually really love the ending to the film. Yeah, it's a bit abrupt. Yeah, it's one of those abrupt. Yeah, the ending is a bit abrupt, but it's one of those abrupt but it's one of those endings where it was trying to be ambiguous, like where it's up to you to decide what happens next. I don't want to get into what happens, but if you've seen the movie, you probably know what I'm talking about. I really love Triangle of Sadness. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention it's very well paced too. Like I said, my only problem I did have with the film is that I did feel it was 15 minutes too long, and I did wish they could have trimmed it down to like 125 minutes. But despite that, this is one of the best movies I've seen this year. And I'm going to give Triangle of Sadness a 9.5 out of 10 or an A. Check this one out.
And the final review I'm involved in, Stars at Noon. While this movie is definitely too long, as there are a lot of pacing issues throughout, this is otherwise a solid romantic thriller with a solid script and good performances from the two leads, as the two had to flee Nicaraguas, if I mispronounced it, only to find themselves in a plethora of conspiracies and secrets. I'd say give this a one-time watch, and I'll give it a seal of approval.
Yeah, I thought it was all right. Yeah, I thought Stars and Noon was okay. The film is very well acted, especially from Margaret Qualley, who's fantastic in the film. Gives out one of the best breakthrough performances I've seen this year so far. Not to mention, you also have great performances by Joe Alwyn, Benny Safdie, Danny Ramirez, and John C. Reilly. It's very well directed. The musical score is haunting and very good. The cinematography is fantastic, and it's nicely edited throughout. Unfortunately, the story was all over the place, and so was and the script really and the script was an inconsistent mess due to the dialogue being confusing as it's poorly paced. The film sluggishly paced throughout, and not only was the film way too long, but while Joe Alwyn and Margaret Qualley do deliver some good performances, not once did their chemistry that they were trying to go for in the film feel legit. I didn't feel any chemistry between the two whatsoever. Overall, it has some memorable moments here and there, and it's very well acted, especially from Margaret Qualley. Unfortunately, though, what we're left with is a movie that, unfortunately, I found Stars at Noon to be inconsistent and pretty forgettable. If I'm going to be honest, I'm going to give it a 5.5 out of 10 or a C plus. I thought it was okay, but not something I'll ever see myself watching again. All right, so looks like I'm down in the showroom with the. Looks like the floor is all mine with these following movies I'm going to talk about. Um, I'll talk about I'll talk about the non-horror films first, like The Good House, God's Country, and Ticket to Paradise, and then I'll talk about the horror films next, and then I'll do the horror films next since it's Halloween. So, starting out with the non-horror movies, the first one I saw is The Good House. This one stars Sigourney. It's based on the novel the same name, and it stars Sigourney Weaver and Kevin Kline and Rob Delaney. And the film is solid. The film is very solid. Like, the acting is very good, especially from Sigourney Weaver, who absolutely shines it throughout the whole film. This is one of the best performances I've seen from an actress this entire year so far. She breaks the fourth wall so many times, but it actually fits the tone and actually fits the tone of the whole film. And I was able to get invested in the story, despite what I'm going to talk about with the story in a little bit, but we'll get to that. Kevin Kline is great in the film. Rob Delaney is great. All the acting is great. The musical score is very good. The cinematography is great. It's nicely edited throughout. It's very well directed. And I found the ending was overall satisfying. I found the ending overall to be very satisfying. However, my main issue, while I said my positives at the story that I was able to get on board with the story, my main problem with the story is that as a story serving the purpose of as a story as a the subject of like alcoholism, we've seen it. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think you glitched out again.
Okay. Oh God. Sorry about that. So I did explain out my positives. My main problem with the story, though, is that as a story covering the subject of alcoholism, it's filled with cliches that you've seen in other films before, and the writing was also really weak, especially with the dialogue and some of the side characters being underdeveloped or just undercooked. It's the pacing's all over the place, and I like I mentioned before, it goes for those cliches that you see in other films before, and and it's also really predictable at times. Like especially when she says, like, Sigourney Weaver's character says she's not going to drink anymore, only for her to drink over and over and over again. I'm like, we get it, movie. We get it. Can you just move on from all this? Despite that, though, I thought the film was solid. It's not great since it's filled with cliches that you've seen in other films before, but it is a solid film that's worth checking out just for Sigourney Weaver. And for that, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 or a B. Next movie is God's Country. This one stars hold on a second. Next movie I'm going to talk about is God's Country. It stars Dandaway Newton in a story about a college professor who is drawn into an escalating battle of wills after she finds two hunters trespassing on her property. I really like this film a lot. I really liked it. It's not great. It definitely has some issues. Like there are some pacing issues in the middle. And there's a subplot in the film that felt a bit like underwritten. That felt a bit undercooked and just goes absolutely nowhere. And I did think some of the side characters. Oh wait, I'm sorry. But that's really it. That's really it as far as. Oh yeah, and there's a weird editing choice they make in the film where it just cuts to black and then show day, first day, second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day, sixth day, and so on. And it was just like, it was clever at first, but then it got annoying real quick. Despite that, though, it was a very good film. I like the story. The script was very good. It's very well directed. The acting is terrific. Dandaway Newton gives out one of my favorite performances of the year. Gives out one of the best breakthrough performances I've seen this year. Sandra Guidry. How she plays the character in the film is absolutely outstanding. And her character feels like a real person, just despite this being a fictional film. The soundtrack is very good. The cinematography is great, and above all, not only does it deliver it delivers one of the most satisfying endings I've ever seen in a movie this entire year so far. It does take some getting used to with the slow burn pace, and while I did feel that the middle of the film had some pacing issues, for the most part, it was nicely paced for a slow burn film, minus the middle. So overall, God's Country was very good. It was absorbing. It was absorbing, and it had Dandaway Newton in one of the best breakthrough performances I've seen this entire year so far. I highly recommend this. I really recommend this one. I give it an 8 out of 10 or a B+. And last but not least, I saw this yesterday. I saw this yesterday, and it's a movie that's doing well at the box office, and I really wasn't a fan of this one. It's called Ticket to Paradise. Ticket to Paradise stars George Clooney and Julia Roberts, and it's basically about a divorced couple who team up to sabotage the impending wedding of their daughter. Gee, does that sound familiar? Does that sound familiar? Like my best friend's wedding? I'll say this. This movie was not terrible. It wasn't a terrible movie. The film is well acted, especially from George Clooney and Julia Roberts, who are very good in this film, and they had some really good chemistry in the film too. And the movie did have a few funny moments here and there. The musical score is very good. The cinematography is solid. It's decent, and it's decently edited too. And there are some charming moments here and there too. Unfortunately, the movie is just filled with cliches that you've seen in other films before, especially with its story, which feels like a ripoff of My Best Friend's Wedding. It's clumsily written, it's the directing's all over the place, and it's poorly paced, and like I said before, it's filled with cliches that you've seen in other movies before. Nothing new, nothing less. Overall, it's not a terrible movie. It is as George Clooney and Julia Roberts are the best things about the whole film, and it does have some funny and charming moments here and there. But like I said before, how many times have we seen movies like this before? Like, how many times have we seen a movie where it's about a person like trying to sabotage one's wedding? Like name me one film other than My Best Friend's Wedding and Wedding Crashers that did this a lot better.
The first Shrek.
Yeah, yeah. This wasn't a terrible movie, but I found Ticket to Paradise to be pretty cliched and just forgettable. 5 out of 10, or C. I've seen worse this year, but it was one I just was not a fan of. If you want to see it just for Julia Roberts and George Clooney, I guess check it out. Check it out at like a matinee price. Otherwise, wait until rental for this one. Just wait until rental. All right, so now we're going to move on to 3 horror films. My first one is one of the biggest surprises. It's a surprisingly solid horror movie, and it's called Smile. Now, Smile follows a therapist played by Susie Bacon, whom, after witnessing the bizarre suicide of a patient, goes through increasingly disturbing and daunting experiences, leading her to believe what she is experiencing is supernatural. This movie was surprisingly solid. When I saw the trailer for it, I thought it looked like absolute shit. Like I could not believe how much I was laughing my ass off with how awful the trailer looked. But when I saw but hearing about the surprisingly good reviews it was receiving, I was curious to check it out, and I was very surprised by this film. Now, it's not a great movie. Like, there's one, although most of the jump scares in this movie are very are creative. There's one jump scare in the film that was not only cliched, but it was also unintentionally hilarious. They show parts of it in the trailer, but it is in the film too. Let's just say it's involving the upside down head. Like, what the fuck was that about? It also suffers through a lot of pacing issues. The writing I felt could have been a lot. Okay, maybe not the writing, but it goes for those, like the story. I also felt the story heavily borrowed a lot of similarities to, like, not only The Ring, but also It Follows, and the ending was really predictable too, which was disappointing. But despite that, I liked it. It's the writing. Parker Finn's writing and directing was solid. The acting was very good, especially from Susie Bacon, who's fantastic in the film, I should say, along with Cal Penn and Rob Morgan. The musical score is great. The cinematography is very good. It's nicely edited. And even though I did say one jump scare was unintentionally hilarious and cliched, most of the jump scares in the film actually served a purpose, and there was real tension behind it. There was real tension in this movie, so that's why the jump scares worked so well, because they actually built some tension to it. So overall, I liked Smile. Overall, while the film can't escape the cliches, since it heavily borrows from better horror films like The Ring and It Follows, Smile nevertheless features a breakthrough performance by Susie Bacon, and it was overall a solid, entertaining horror film, and for that, I'm giving Smile a 7 out of 10, or a B. And now, next movie I'm talking about is one of my favorite movies I've seen this year. I loved Axe, and it was only And I was very surprised when I found out that its prequel was going to be coming out later this year in September. So I went to see Pearl. I was very excited to see this film Pearl, which Pearl is a prequel to X and the second installment of the film series, and it serves as an origin story for the title villain whose fervent uh, uh, aspiration. I'm sorry, aspiration to become a movie star led her to committing violent acts on her family's Texas homestead in 1918. As Austin put it in his as Austin Putnam put it in his review, imagine if Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz was demented and fucked up. That's the best way I would describe the character of Pearl. And Mia Goth's performance in the film is absolutely fantastic. Like the smile she carries. Seriously, the smile she like carries at the end of the film, like if that doesn't send chills to your spine, then I don't know what does. The writing was terrific. The writing was absolutely terrific. Actually, let me. Um, I do think A24 like mismarketed the film, thinking it's a slasher film when it's really a psychological character study thriller. But damn, man, this was one of the most unsettling and disturbing films I've seen this entire year, and yet, what a film this was. I already described Mia Goth and the character Pearl. Let's talk about let's talk about um let's talk about what I also loved about the film. The story was fantastic. The script was Ty West's script and directing was terrific. Uh, excuse me. The musical score, the soundtrack was phenomenal. The cinematography is terrific. It has amazing production value and costume design. It's very well edited, very well paced, and the third act of the film had me creeped out. Seriously. Like I said before, the best way I would describe Pearl's character, like I said before, imagine if Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz was demented and fucked up. That's the best way to describe Pearl as a character. And the ending, as I said before, is one of the most unsettling yet terrific endings I've ever seen in the movie this entire year. I would say my only problem, I would say this is really more of a nitpick, but maybe there were like one or two scenes in the middle that did kind of slow the film down a bit. Most of the film was very well paced, don't get me wrong, but I did feel they could have trimmed a couple scenes down. But despite that, it's one of my favorite movies I've seen this year. Pearl is one of the most unsettling yet powerful and mesmerizing character study movies I have seen this entire year. And it's worth check. I absolutely recommend this one. Just because Mia Goth also delivers one of the best rated performances I've seen this year as Pearl. It's a wonderful film that also pays homages to like the golden age of Hollywood, whether it's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre or just The Wizard of Oz. Easily one of the best movies I've seen this year, and I'm going to give Pearl a 9.5 out of 10 or an A. And if you were to ask me, I loved Pearl just as much as X. That's how much I really love this movie. I highly recommend this one. It's one of my favorites of this year so far. And now we get to this film.
Oh boy.
Give me a second. Folks, if you thought this franchise couldn't get any worse after Halloween Kills, this movie makes Halloween Kills look like Halloween H2O. Yep. Next movie, our last movie I'm going to be talking about is one of the worst movies I've seen this year. And remember when I said earlier that Amsterdam was a disaster? Well, guess what? This one is too. It's Halloween Ends.
Well, like Halloween ends with a whimper.
Yeah, really. We had 4 years to see what happened, to see how it ends, and this is the best you guys can come up with? Really? Holy shit. Like, this is the best you could come up with? A shoehorned in love story between Corey and Allison that serves no purpose, that feels absolutely pointless, and it's filled with so many cliches that you've seen in other films before. And you don't have Michael Myers show up until nearly 55 minutes into this? Really?
Hell, I think Halloween 3 has more Michael Myers in it, and Michael isn't even in that movie.
Yeah, really. Oh my god. Oh yeah, there are some things in it that I gotta spoil, because there's this one scene when Michael Myers shows up. This one scene really pissed me off. So, spoiler alert. I don't care. You shouldn't see the movie anyway. I'm gonna spoil something that happens. Here we go. So there's this thing in the film where Corey, played by Rowan Campbell, who's actually pretty solid in the film, I should add, despite how terribly written his character was, who's being ridiculed by everyone, just because he was framed for killing the 10-year-old boy named Jeremy, which, by the way, despite how cool that the kill was, it was really predictable from the start. So he was being set up. He was being framed for a crime for killing Jeremy, and then there's this thing that happens when Michael Myers shows up halfway through the film. He notices Jeremy going through all the crap he's going through, and just as he's about to kill him, and notice all the things he did, Michael Myers all of a sudden lets him go. And then after that, Corey teams up with Michael Myers.
This is Don't Breathe 2 all over again.
When would Michael Myers even show sympathy for one? When? And how is that even possible? You were saying, Søren?
And I haven't seen this movie, but what really killed it for me is the fact that this movie isn't even about Michael Myers. This is Jurassic World defecation all over again. I mean, say what you will about Rise of Skywalker and Transformania, at least their stories kept true to the original course of their franchises.
Yeah, you're right. Even despite how much I hated the Rise of Skywalker, but honestly, I would rather watch that than sit through Halloween Ends and Jurassic World defecation all over again. I mean, ever again. I guess the only positives I do have with the film, other than Rohan Campbell, is that other than him, Jamie Lee Curtis is very good as always as Laurie Strode. Are you guys even surprised? She's always the best thing about it. The musical score is good, the cinematography is good, and the final fight between her and Michael Myers was actually pretty satisfying. I will say. Otherwise, though, Halloween Ends is absolutely one of the most frustrating and just downright inconsistent movies I have seen this entire year. 2 out of 10. 2 out of 10 or a D. Even if you were a fan of Halloween Kills, you're going to be disappointed with the way they end this. I'm not even kidding when I say that this is worse than Halloween Kills, and not only that, this is one of the worst movies I've seen this year. Just, I hate that we have to end the new movie reviews on a sour note, but guys, don't waste your time with Halloween Ends. It's not worth it. Oh, how the mighty have fallen.
Yeah.
On the plus side, though, even though we're done talking about the the new movie reviews, we're gonna end the show tonight with a classic review of one of what I consider to be one of the greatest horror and horror thriller movies of all time. And I know it seems like I'm copying like Austin Putnam since he recently did a review of this, but I actually did want to talk about this movie because and why I consider it a classic. That's right. It's time to talk about 1990s Misery. Now, if you have not heard of Misery, first of all, what the hell are you doing? Stop watching this video and go watch this movie, please. But if you want to hear about it, I guess I'll tell you about it. It's based on the Stephen King novel of the same name, where the plot centers around an obsessive fan who holds an author captive and forces him to rewrite the finale to his book series. This is one of the best. This is not just one of the best Stephen King book to film adaptations I've ever seen. It's one of the best horror films I've ever seen in my life. It's one of the best psychological thriller and horror movies I've ever seen in my life. Why? Because not only was the story absolutely fantastic with the way it was executed, but the script was absolutely terrific too, with excellent dialogue, great character development, and a twist that will leave you on the edge of your seat. I don't want to spoil what happens, but once you see that twist, oh boy, oh boy.
One thing I got from the script is this movie kind of serves as some sort of commentary on the writing. I mean, James Caan is known for his Misery series, but he clearly wants to move on to better things. But it's clear that Kathy Bates wants him to do more, even though he kills off Misery at the end of the last book.
Yeah. And the way the script, and the way William Goldman wrote the script was absolutely fantastic, and it also shows like how sometimes some people can get way too carried away with not just famous people, but also the works of fiction they have done. And that's why the story and the theme works so well with this movie. not only was it well directed by Rob Reiner of all people, but the acting was absolutely terrific. James Caan was fantastic as Paul Sheldon, and I did wish he would have gotten like more recognition for his performance, like back then, like he does now. But obviously, we all know why we're going to talk about this. We all know why we were going to talk about this movie. Kathy Bates as Annie Wilkes. Kathy Bates easily deserved that Best Actress Oscar for her performance, because this is one of the most powerful performances I have ever seen from an actress. The way she gets into her character and the way she performs as the character is absolutely outstanding. This is like one moment you see her as just like an average number one fan, but then in the other you see her as like a crazy lunatic, as well as something else that, again, I don't want to spoil, but in case you guys haven't seen it, which please do after this video, or just stop what you're doing and just go watch it. It's a great movie. Seriously, what a performance from Kathy Bates. There was a reason why she won Best Actress for her performance, because this is a powerful performance from her. The musical score was fantastic. The cinematography is terrific, with the way it captured a lot of shots within, like, not just the blizzard, but the landscapes of the mountains and stuff, and other types of beautiful stuff. The editing was terrific. It's very well paced. The tension feels real. The twist they threw in the film was excellent, and the ending, the final, and the climax is one of the most exciting. Is one of the best climaxes I've ever seen in a movie. Guys, please do yourself a favor and go watch Misery as soon as you can. It's one of the best psychological thriller and horror movies I've ever seen, and it's one of the best Stephen King book to film adaptations I have ever seen in my life. Without a doubt, I'm giving Rob Reiner's Misery. Without a doubt, I'm going to give Misery an 11 out of 10 or an S ranking. Please check this one out. It's one of the best horror films I've ever seen in my life. Check it out. Well, that'll do it for today's podcast. That'll do it for today's FilmBrony Podcast. I know this was a bit shorter than the last one, but we had not much else to talk about since Christian's away for Halloween to celebrate with his nephews for Halloween. Which, Christian, if you're watching this, we love you, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
And plus, we have a lot of things we're going to be doing. We're going to be doing this Halloween as well. So, but we will be back again in November for episode 33 of the FilmBrony Podcast, and thank you guys very much for watching, and thank you Søren for joining me on for doing this podcast. Be sure to subscribe to Søren, the FilmBrony, on his YouTube channel. The link is in the description below. Give him the love he absolutely deserves. He's a great YouTuber and a great friend. And until we meet again for episode 33, hope you guys have a great Halloween, and I will see you all in November. Happy Halloween, and see you later.